Shaykh bin Baz, was, of course, amazing. Here was a man blind, who had reached this status of, he was the head of the university when I had gotten there. He was the head, mudir, or president of the university. And, he would regularly give uh, khutbas or lectures in the masjid of Medina. He didn't keep himself away from the students. People would always be pouring into his office. He wasn't one to have a lot of uh, uh, blocks.
So you were saying
Sorry.
that they keep pouring into his office.
Yeah. Everybody would come into his office, as students, right? Before him, maybe the previous, I don't know, maybe he was the one right from the beginning, sorry. Yeah, but in his time, he was accessible. This is what I could see as a classical um, characteristic of himself, character, somebody accessible, as the Prophet ﷺ was accessible, people used to come, old women would hold his hand or whatever, when he's walking, people, he was not, he didn't have guards around him. No, 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 you get off here, you get off here, this is the Prophet here now, make way for the Prophet. No, no, he was accessible. Shaykh bin Baz was the living example of that, of accessibility. And even when he went to Riyadh, I moved to Riyadh after, he moved to Riyadh earlier and had become the main mufti of Saudi Arabia. Still, that accessibility remained. In his home, he would regularly have, meals for anybody who would come in, fill the tables, come. You could always go to Sheikh bin Baz's house, Beit al-Sheikh, he provided support for students when they went home, to continue the dawah. So he was really, a very accessible person, very down to earth, very simple, but at the same time, a great scholar in his own right. Of course, he had opinions and things which differed from that of Sheikh Nasser, but they respected each other, and and they both worked in their own spheres that they operated in. So, these were the big figures. There were Omar al-Fulata, for example. Is originally from Nigeria. Fulata from the Fulanis is known as Omar al-Fulata. He was, giving lectures in the Medina Mosque, but he is a lecturer in the university itself. One of the leading scholars of that time. There was Abu Bakr al-Jazairi, also, who I became quite close with. I sat and listened under his lectures, etc. These were you could say, probably the biggest figures that, I learned from.
Amazing.
I can say that Sheikh Abdul Muhsin al-Abbad, he was the supervisor for my BA thesis. So I learned also, he later became the president of the Islamic University of Medina. But I learned from him, and I learned how to be patient, because I remember in the first class that I took in Aqidah in the university, he was the person who taught Aqidah. Mm-hmm. And I asked questions which were questions based on what Westerners, how Westerners thought. the type of questions that they would ask, because I'm trying to learn from him how to handle Western thought. I'm going back to the West. So it's not enough for me to understand how you would answer a Muslim this question, or somebody from the East, but how you would answer the question of a Westerner. So, and my Arabic was limited, so I wasn't able to convey to him that I'm asking this question not for myself, but for people from the West, non-Muslims, who will ask this question. When I say this, they're going to ask that, So, the idea that when we say, who created everything, it is Allah. This is, Allah's characteristic of, Allah is the creator of everything. And then the question that comes after that, and even children will ask this question, so who created Allah? So, so when I raised this question in the Aqidah class, he actually said, you have become a disbeliever.
Okay.
Kafar.
Wow.
That question was a question of kufr. Of course it was like a boom in the head, wow, but, I had to be patient with it and to try to go back to him after class and sit with him and explain to him, where I was coming from, but I had to learn to take that. Had I not been able to take that, that would have been the end of my studies right there.
Yeah,
somebody calls you a kafir because you asked a question, that's it, man. What's the point? But I had to try to figure out and understand, where he was coming from. And obviously I had not effectively conveyed to him, where I was actually coming from. Later on, I became his most popular student for that batch. And he used to welcome my questions because he understood now where I was coming from. And even the other students would be telling me, don't ask so many questions. You're delaying the class and the course, and, but he would encourage me to ask. So, that was a learning point, where I had to adjust and be patient, stay focused. That same point that we always keep. Why were we here? We're here to get this knowledge. So it means we have to make the necessary sacrifices to get it. We don't let difficulties which are bound to arise, end up ending our studies. Because many people had come before us, from the people from the Americas, from the West, we, Abdullah and myself, were the first two to enter into the College of Medina. Many others had come, but they didn't get farther than the Language Institute. They couldn't deal with the circumstances, Some of them were walking off the plane, and after they came to the, to the terminal, they wanted to get back on the plane and get out. That was it. So there were many before us, and the students who were there from different parts of Africa and Asia, etc., who were our friends. They would tell us about, there was this guy, he came and he lasted for 10 days. Or that one, he lasted for 2 months. Or this one, he only lasted 1 day. He was back out. Wow. So, we were like the first pioneers. Abdullah and myself and Muhammad, Abdul Muhammad, and Mus'ab, we were the first. From Europe, the couple of Germans had come, about 3. 2 stayed, 1 dropped out, went back, but 2 stayed and went through their studies also from Europe. They actually preceded us, so we could say, in terms of graduating from Medina, they were the first 2 who were from the West in its totality. We were the first 2, Abdullah and myself, from Americas, from the Americas, north, south, central.
And you're saying
So
what in the history of Medina, like?
yeah, we
Wow,
were the first. Yeah,
amazing.
yeah,
Alhamdulillah. I mean, Sheikh, this is like inspiring stuff, and you know we can only like hear the stories and imagine like the sacrifice, because even now when we go Medina, it's like it's hot and it's wonderful, and we've got 5-star hotels and we've got food and we've got everything, and it's even now I hear students from Medina University are saying it's hard. Right? So to imagine what it would have
yeah.
been like 40, 50 years ago, it's insane to even think about it, So
Yeah,
very, very
exactly.
inspiring.